in the bustling metropolis of Lagos, a place of relentless energy. For some, Lagos was a city of opportunity. For others, it was a battleground of hardship. Among its vibrant chaos was Nyla, a woman whose life seemed untouched by the city's struggles. Nyla lived in an elegant mansion in Victoria Island, a place where the streets were lined with mansions and the air smelled of wealth. She was the wife of James, a successful businessman known for his sprawling import and export empire. Nyla had everything: servants to cater to her needs, closets full of designer clothes, and invitations to the grandest parties. But Nyla's heart was soft. She often told her friends at social gatherings, "We cannot turn a blind eye to the suffering around us." Her friends would chuckle and say, "Nyla, there will always be beggars. You can't save them all." Still, Nyla believed in helping whoever she could. Every morning she carried a wad of cash in her purse, ready to hand out to the street beggars who lined the roads of Lagos. She felt a deep satisfaction in seeing their faces light up, even if only for a moment. One fateful afternoon, Nyla's car rolled to a stop at a busy intersection. Street vendors weaved between cars, selling everything from plantain chips to phone chargers. Among them was a beggar Nyla had never seen before. This woman stood apart. Her clothes were ragged, but there was something striking about her presence. Her eyes were piercing, almost too sharp, as if she could see straight into your soul. Nyla's driver, Tim, glanced at the woman uneasily. "Madam, don't give her money," Tim warned. "Some of these beggars are not what they seem." Nyla hesitated for a moment. She looked at the woman again and noticed her gaunt face, her trembling hands. "Everyone deserves help, Tim," Nyla said softly. She rolled down the window and handed the woman a crisp N1000 note. The beggar's thin lips curled into a smile, but her gaze lingered on Nyla. "Thank you, madam," she said in a voice that felt both grateful and unsettling. "You have a good heart. But beware, kind hearts often bleed." Nyla's chest tightened. The woman's words were odd, but before she could ask what she meant, the traffic light turned green and Tim drove off. That evening, Nyla sat in her lavish dining room, staring at the plate of jollof rice and grilled chicken in front of her. James was on a business trip, so she ate alone. The woman's words echoed in her mind. "Kind hearts often bleed." She shook her head and chuckled to herself. "What a strange thing to say," she muttered. The next day, Nyla saw the same woman again at a different intersection. This time, the beggar wasn't standing. She was crouched by the side of the road, her hand outstretched. Nyla didn't need Tim's warning to feel the unease, but once again she rolled down the window. "Thank you, madam," the woman said as Nyla handed her another N1000 note. Then, leaning in closer, she added, "Be careful, madam. Not all beggars are poor and not all coins are clean." Before Nyla could reply, the traffic surged forward. As her car moved, she caught a glimpse of the beggar tucking the money into a small leather pouch. Over the next few weeks, Nyla's encounters with the woman became regular. The beggar, whose name Nyla eventually learned was Rachel, always seemed to appear on the streets Nyla drove through. Rachel's words were always cryptic, her tone unsettling, yet Nyla continued to give her money. One day, Nyla decided to speak with Rachel for longer. She had Tim pull the car to the side of the road. "Rachel," Nyla said as she stepped out of the car, "why do you always say such strange things? What do you mean by not all coins are clean?" Rachel's lips twitched into a smile. "Some questions are better left unanswered, madam," she said. Then after a pause she added, "But since you've asked, I'll tell you this. Not all acts of kindness bring blessings." Nyla frowned. "Are you saying I shouldn't give money to people like you?" Rachel tilted her head. "Not everyone who asks for help needs it, and not everyone who needs help will ask for it." The words puzzled Nyla, but before she could press further, Rachel stood up and shuffled away into the crowd. That night Nyla couldn't sleep. Her mind churned with thoughts of Rachel's warnings. Why did Rachel speak in riddles? Was she trying to scare her, or was there a deeper meaning? The next morning, Nyla decided to look into Rachel's life. She didn't know where to start, but something about the beggar's words wouldn't let her rest. As her car moved through the bustling streets of Lagos that day, Nyla watched the crowds more closely. She didn't notice it before, but there were so many beggars. How many of them were like Rachel? And what did Rachel mean about some coins not being clean? For the first time, Nyla felt doubt creep into her heart. Had her kindness been misplaced all along? In a dimly lit room, Rachel sat hunched on a wooden stool. The small space reeked of dampness, the only light coming from a flickering kerosene lamp. In her hands she held the pouch of money she had collected during the day. She counted each note with trembling fingers, murmuring softly under her breath. When she finished, she tied the pouch tightly and placed it in a metal box. "You're late," a deep voice growled from the shadows. Rachel froze, her heart racing. Slowly she turned toward the dark corner of the room. Out of the shadows stepped a man, tall and broad-shouldered, his eyes gleaming with an unsettling intensity. This was Malcolm, the ritualist she served. I came as fast as I could," Rachel stammered, clutching the metal box tightly. Malcolm's lips curled into a menacing smile. "I don't care for excuses. Do you have the coins?" Rachel nodded and handed the box to him. Malcolm opened it, his face lighting up as he examined the crisp notes and coins inside. "Good," he muttered. "Very good." For years Rachel had worked for Malcolm. At first she had been desperate, a widow with no money and 2 young children to feed. Malcolm had found her on the streets and offered her what seemed like salvation. But it wasn't salvation, it was a curse. Malcolm needed coins touched by the kindness of others. He believed such coins carried the energy of goodwill and could be used to fuel his dark magic. His rituals were rumored to grant wealth and power to his clients, but at a terrible cost. Those who gave their money unknowingly became entangled in his web of curses. Rachel had tried to leave many times, but Malcolm always found her. He had ways of reminding her who was in control. Last year, when Rachel attempted to escape, her eldest son had fallen mysteriously ill. Malcolm had appeared at her door the same night, his voice dripping with malice. "Do not forget, Rachel," he had said, "your children's lives depend on your loyalty to me." Since then Rachel had resigned herself to her fate. Every day she begged on the streets, seeking out wealthy and generous people like Nyla. And every night she delivered the cursed coins to Malcolm. But Nyla was different. Rachel couldn't explain it, but from the moment she saw Nyla, she felt a strange connection. There was something about the woman's kindness that made Rachel hesitate. And for reasons she couldn't understand, she had tried to warn her. Meanwhile, Nyla had grown increasingly uneasy. Rachel's warnings replayed in her mind like a haunting melody. Determined to learn more, she confided in her closest friend Lucy over lunch. "Lucy," Nyla began, "have you ever felt like someone's hiding something from you? Like they're warning you about something dangerous?" Lucy raised an eyebrow. "What are you talking about?" Nyla hesitated, then explained her encounters with Rachel, the beggar's cryptic warnings and unsettling presence. When she finished, Lucy frowned. "Nyla, you have to be careful. I've heard stories about beggars being involved in shady activities. Some of them work for ritualists." Nyla's stomach churned. "You think Rachel could be involved in something like that?" "I don't know," Lucy said, "but it's better to be safe. Maybe you should stop giving her money." Nyla nodded, but deep down she wasn't convinced. She decided to find out the truth for herself. The next day, Nyla asked Tim to follow Rachel after she handed her the usual N1000 note. "Madam, are you sure about this?" Tim asked, glancing at Nyla in the rearview mirror. "I need to know," Nyla replied firmly. From a safe distance they trailed Rachel through the streets. The beggar wove through the crowd with practiced ease, eventually slipping into a narrow alley. Nyla and Tim parked the car and followed on foot, careful to stay hidden. The alley led to an old, crumbling building. Rachel entered through a side door, glancing over her shoulder before disappearing inside. Nyla's heart pounded as she and Tim crept closer. "Stay here, madam," Tim whispered. "I'll go check." But before he could stop her, Nyla pushed the door open slightly and peered inside. What she saw made her blood run cold. Rachel was kneeling before a tall man with a commanding presence. The room was filled with strange symbols drawn on the walls, and the air was thick with the smell of burning herbs. Nyla watched as Rachel handed the man a metal box. He opened it and began sifting through the money, his expression one of sinister delight. Nyla's breath caught in her throat. She had never seen anything like this before. The man's aura was dark, almost otherworldly. She didn't know who he was, but she instinctively knew he was dangerous. Suddenly, the man's head snapped up and his piercing gaze locked onto the doorway. "Who's there?" he barked. Nyla stumbled backward, her heart racing. She grabbed Tim's arm and they hurried back to the car. "Madam, what did you see?" Tim asked as he started the engine. Nyla's voice trembled. "I don't know exactly. But whatever it is, it's evil." That night, Nyla lay awake in bed, her mind spinning. She realized she was caught in something far darker than she had imagined. Who was this man and what did he want with Rachel? And most importantly, how had she, Nyla, a woman who only wanted to help, become entangled in such a sinister plot? As she stared at the ceiling, a single thought burned in her mind: I must find out the truth. Driven by a mix of fear and determination, Nyla decided she couldn't ignore this any longer. She had to uncover the truth. The next morning, Nyla made her way to Lucy's house. If there was anyone who could help her make sense of this, it was her friend. Over a steaming cup of tea, Nyla recounted everything she had seen, her voice trembling as she described the man in the shadows. Lucy listened intently, her brow furrowed. "Nyla, this isn't just some random beggar. Rachel is connected to something dangerous, something spiritual. You need to stay away from her." "But I can't just walk away," Nyla protested. "What if I'm already involved? What if giving her money has—" Her voice trailed off and she swallowed hard. "What if it's cursed?" Lucy leaned forward, her voice low. "You need to speak to someone who understands these things. There's an old woman in my church, Mama J. People say she's wise and knows about spiritual matters. Let's visit her." Later that day, Lucy and Nyla drove to a small house tucked away in a quiet neighborhood. Mama J was waiting for them on her porch, her frail figure wrapped in a colorful shawl. Her sharp eyes seemed to pierce through Nyla the moment she stepped out of the car. "You've brought trouble with you," Mama J said without preamble. Nyla's heart skipped a beat. "How did you know?" The old woman beckoned them inside. Once seated, Nyla explained everything. Her encounters with Rachel, the cryptic warnings, and the mysterious man in the shadows. Mama J listened in silence, her expression grave. When Nyla finished, Mama J sighed heavily. "This man you describe, he is no ordinary man. He is a ritualist, a man who deals in dark powers. The money you gave Rachel was not just money. It was a piece of your kindness, your spirit. Such things can be used for evil purposes." Nyla's blood ran cold. "But I didn't know. I was just trying to help. Intentions matter little in the spiritual realm," Mama J said gently. "What matters is what you do next. You must cut your ties with this woman and her master. But be warned, it will not be easy. They may come for you." Nyla left Mama J's house feeling both enlightened and terrified. Her first instinct was to stop all contact with Rachel, but deep down she knew she couldn't just walk away. Rachel was trapped just as Nyla now felt trapped. That night, Nyla sat alone in her living room, staring at the stack of cash she had planned to give away. Her hands trembled as she thought about all the people she had helped over the years. How many of them had been like Rachel? How many had taken her kindness and twisted it into something dark? A sudden knock at the door jolted her from her thoughts. She hesitated, her heart pounding. Who could be visiting this late? When she opened the door, Rachel stood there, her face pale and her eyes frantic. "Rachel!" Nyla exclaimed. "What are you doing here?" "I had to warn you," Rachel said, her voice shaking. "Malcolm knows about you. He saw you at the building. He said you're meddling where you don't belong." Nyla's stomach turned. "What does he want from me?" Rachel stepped closer, lowering her voice. "He says you owe him something. He's marked you now." The next few days were a blur of fear and paranoia. Nyla found herself constantly looking over her shoulder, feeling as though unseen eyes were watching her every move. Her once peaceful home now felt suffocating, and even her dreams were plagued by images of Malcolm's piercing eyes. One evening as she walked to her car, she noticed a small object lying on the windshield. It was a coin, old and tarnished, but with strange symbols etched into its surface. Nyla's heart raced. She didn't touch it. Instead, she called Lucy, who came over immediately. "This is a warning," Lucy said, her voice trembling. "Malcolm is sending a message. He's letting you know he's watching you." "What should I do?" Nyla whispered, her voice barely audible. "You need protection," Lucy replied. "And you need to act fast. If Malcolm has marked you, it's only a matter of time before he tries something worse." That night, Nyla locked all her doors and windows. She lit a candle and sat in the center of her living room, praying for strength and clarity. Her mind raced with memories of Rachel, of Mama J's warnings, and of the coin on her windshield. She couldn't let Malcolm win. He had to fight back. But how do you fight against the darkness when it knows your every move? As the candle flickered, a sudden gust of wind blew through the room, snuffing out the flame. Nyla gasped, her body trembling. And then in the silence she heard it, a low, guttural laugh echoing through the shadows. Malcolm was coming. The laugh haunted Nyla long after the wind had died down. The room was deathly silent, yet her heart pounded loud enough to drown out her thoughts. Malcolm's presence was no longer a shadow in her mind. It was a creeping reality that threatened to engulf her. The next morning, Nyla decided she could no longer live in fear. She had to fight back. She gathered her courage and reached out to Mama J for help. When Nyla arrived at the old woman's house, Mama J was already waiting for her. A table in the center of the room held a Bible, a small jar of oil, and a bundle of dried herbs. "You are ready to fight," Mama J said, her voice steady but grave. "But be warned, this is not a battle of strength. It is a battle of will and spirit. Do you have the courage to see it through?" Nyla nodded, though her hands trembled at her sides. "I don't want to live in fear anymore. Tell me what to do." Mama J explained that the first step was to sever the spiritual connection Malcolm had established. The coins Nyla had given to Rachel were a gateway, a means for Malcolm to tether himself to Nyla's energy. To break the link, Nyla had to reclaim her spirit through an act of purification. That evening, under Mama J's guidance, Nyla prepared for the ritual. She sat in the middle of her living room, surrounded by burning herbs that filled the air with a pungent, almost choking scent. Mama J prayed fervently, her voice rising and falling in a cadence that seemed to shake the very walls. At the height of the prayer, Mama J placed a hand on Nyla's forehead and whispered, "Speak your truth, child. Reject the darkness. Take back what is yours." Tears streamed down Nyla's face as she cried out, "I did not give my kindness to be twisted into evil. I take back what belongs to me." The room shuddered as if an unseen force was being ripped away. The candle flames flickered violently, then burned steady. Nyla felt an overwhelming sense of relief, as though a heavy weight had been lifted from her chest. But Mama J was not finished. "This is only the beginning," she said. "Malcolm will not let go so easily. He will retaliate. You must be prepared." The next day, Nyla began her investigation into Malcolm. She enlisted Tim's help to follow Rachel once more. This time she needed to know the full extent of Malcolm's operations. Tim was hesitant. "Madam, this is dangerous. If this man is who you say he is, you might not come back from this." "I don't have a choice," Nyla said. "If I run, he'll only come after me. I need to face him on my terms." They followed Rachel again, but this time, Nyla stayed hidden in the car while Tim went inside the building. Hours passed and Nyla's anxiety grew. When Tim finally returned, his face was pale, and his hands trembled as he gripped the steering wheel. "Madam, it's worse than we thought," he said. "Malcolm isn't just a ritualist. He has a network. People who feed him coins, charms, even human lives. Rachel is just one of many." Nyla's stomach churned. "What can we do?" Tim glanced at her, his expression grim. "We need evidence. Something to expose him. If we can't stop him spiritually, we can stop him legally." That night, Nyla and Tim devised a plan. With Lucy's help, they procured a small recording device. The next time Nyla encountered Rachel, she would confront her and try to get her to confess to her involvement with Malcolm. When the day came, Nyla's nerves were on edge. She saw Rachel at her usual spot, sitting on the pavement with her hand outstretched. Nyla stepped out of the car, the recording device hidden in her purse. "Rachel," Nyla said, her voice steady but firm. "I need to talk to you." Rachel looked up, her face a mask of fear. "You shouldn't be here, madam. He's watching." "I don't care," Nyla replied. "Tell me the truth, Rachel. Why are you working for Malcolm? What is he doing with the money I gave you?" Rachel hesitated, glancing nervously at the crowd. "I didn't have a choice," she whispered. "He controls everything. If I don't do what he says, my children will die." "Rachel, listen to me," Nyla said, her tone urgent. "You can stop this. Help me expose him and we can bring him down together." Tears welled in Rachel's eyes. For a moment it seemed as though she might agree. But then her face twisted with fear and she shook her head. "You don't understand. He's too powerful. He'll destroy us both." Before Nyla could say more, a commotion erupted nearby. A tall figure emerged from the shadows, his presence sending a wave of terror through the crowd. It was Malcolm. Rachel froze, her face pale as a sheet. Malcolm's eyes locked onto Nyla and a cruel smile spread across his face. "So," he said, his voice low and menacing. "You couldn't mind your own business." Nyla's heart pounded, but she refused to back down. "I know what you're doing, Malcolm. And I won't let you get away with it." Malcolm laughed, a sound that sent chills down her spine. "You think you can stop me? You don't even understand what you're dealing with." But Nyla stood her ground, clutching her purse tightly. He had the recording. She had Rachel's fear etched into her memory. And she had the courage to fight. As Malcolm stepped closer, she whispered under her breath, "This isn't over." Nyla's confrontation with Malcolm left her shaken but resolute. She had started a war against a man cloaked in darkness, and retreat was no longer an option. She had the recording of Rachel's trembling confession, and while it wasn't much, it was a start. That night, Nyla, Lucy, and Tim gathered in Nyla's home to plan their next steps. "We have to expose him," Nyla said, pacing the room. "If the authorities see what he's doing, they'll have no choice but to act." Tim frowned. "Madam, this man isn't just dangerous, he's connected. He has people protecting him. We can't go to the police without solid evidence." "What about Rachel?" Lucy suggested. "If she agrees to testify." "She won't," Nyla interrupted. "She's terrified of him. But maybe we don't need her testimony. If we can find proof of his rituals, anything that ties him to the dark magic he's using, we can make sure he's stopped." The next day, Nyla and Tim returned to the crumbling building where Rachel had delivered the money. This time they came armed with cameras and voice recorders, determined to capture whatever they could. As they approached the building, a sense of foreboding hung heavy in the air. Nyla felt her hands tremble, but she forced herself to press on. Inside, the building was eerily silent. The air was thick with the smell of incense and decay. Nyla and Tim crept through the corridors, their footsteps barely making a sound. In one room they found symbols drawn on the walls, intricate patterns that pulsed with an unsettling energy. Nyla snapped photos while Tim recorded the scene. But as they moved deeper into the building, they stumbled upon something far more disturbing. A small chamber filled with strange artifacts. There were candles, bowls filled with dark liquid, and bundles of feathers and bones. In the center of the room was a table covered in coins, some old and tarnished, others fresh and glinting in the dim light. "This must be it," Tim whispered. "This is where he performs the rituals." Nyla's stomach churned. She reached for her phone to take another picture, but before she could, the sound of footsteps echoed through the building. "Someone's coming," Tim hissed. They ducked behind a pile of crates just as a group of men entered the chamber. At their center was Malcolm, his presence as oppressive as ever. Malcolm strode to the table, his eyes scanning the coins. "Everything is in place," he said. "The next ritual will be more powerful than ever. No one will dare challenge me." Nyla's heart raced. She held her breath, praying they wouldn't be discovered. But as Malcolm spoke, his voice shifted, growing louder and more guttural. He began chanting in a language Nyla didn't understand, and the room seemed to tremble with an otherworldly energy. The symbols on the walls began to glow faintly and the air grew colder. Nyla clutched Tim's arm, her mind screaming for her to run, but she knew they couldn't leave without the evidence. Dapo raised his camera, his hands shaking, and began recording. Suddenly Malcolm stopped chanting. His head snapped toward their hiding spot and his eyes narrowed. "Who's there?" he barked. Nyla's breath caught in her throat. Before she could react, two of Malcolm's men advanced toward the crates. Tim grabbed her arm. "Run," he whispered fiercely. They bolted from their hiding spot, sprinting down the corridor as Malcolm's men gave chase. The building seemed to twist and turn endlessly, every corner blending into the next. Nyla's lungs burned and her heart pounded in her ears. Finally, they burst through the front door and into the open street. Nyla stumbled but kept running, Tim close behind her. They didn't stop until they reached the car. Back at Nyla's house, they reviewed the footage and photos. The evidence they had gathered was chilling. A clear record of Malcolm's rituals and his cryptic words about growing more powerful. "This is enough," Tim said. "We can take this to someone who can stop him." But Nyla shook her head. "It's not just about stopping Malcolm. It's about freeing Rachel and everyone else he's trapped. We need to destroy his power. The next day Nyla and her friends returned to Mama J. The old woman listened as they recounted their harrowing experience, her expression grave. You were brave to gather this evidence, she said, but if you want to destroy Malcolm, you must go further. You must break the source of his power. What is his source? Nyla asked. The coins, Mama J replied. They are his connection to the spirits he commands. If you destroy them you will sever his power. That night, armed with the knowledge Mama J had given them, Nyla, Lucy and Tim returned to the crumbling building. This time they weren't there to hide. They were there to end Malcolm's reign. They snuck into the chamber and found the table of coins. Nyla's hands shook as she poured kerosene over the table. Are you sure about this? Tim whispered. Nyla nodded. It's the only way. She struck a match and dropped it onto the table. The fire roared to life, consuming the coins in a blaze of light and heat. Suddenly the ground trembled and a deafening roar echoed through the building. Malcolm appeared in the doorway, his face twisted with rage. You dare challenge me, he bellowed. Nyla stepped forward, her voice steady despite her fear. Your power's gone, Malcolm. You can't hurt anyone anymore. Malcolm lunged toward her, but before he could reach her, the fire surged, engulfing the room in flames. Nyla and her friends fled as the building collapsed behind them, burying Malcolm and his dark magic in the rubble. In the days that followed, Nyla felt a sense of peace she hadn't known in months. Rachel came to her, tears streaming down her face, and thanked her for setting her free. You were brave, Rachel said. Braver than I ever could have been. Nyla smiled faintly. Sometimes bravery is just doing what you know is right. As she walked away, Nyla knew she had not only defeated a powerful enemy but also reclaimed her own strength. The darkness had tried to consume her, but in the end her light had burned brighter.